Alright, so we are done with this job just about as far as the hyper grinder goes, and then we're going to bring in the hyper orbit. So Chrissy is currently running 60 grit bone and grain on the hyper grinder in the living room, and in this job, like many of our jobs, we start at the back of the house and work our way forward. That way when we're done sanding everything, we're heading towards the front of the house, towards the exit which we came in with. All the machines never retouch a floor or go across the floor that we've already sanded. So that's the way we try to schedule the jobs as far as the flow of the job. So let's walk in and let's take a quick look at Chrissy running the hyper grinder with Bona Green 60 grit, and let's see if she's got it clocked at the 4 o'clock position. So just another little scraper trick. Probably a lot of people already know this, but I'm gonna make sure you guys know it. And it's stupid, but it's helpful, okay? So, you ever get into a situation where you're scraping something, so like I wanna get this out obviously, right? And there's a hole here from the pipe. Or another situation could be if you were against a wall, let's say this is the wall right here, draw the line, that's the wall. This piece of wood comes into it, and there's a gap between the wood and the wall, right? And you're running your scraper, and it gets stuck in the gap. In this case, it's gonna get stuck in here, right? All you gotta do, turn your scraper just a little bit of an angle, right? Done. Is inside this closet, and unfortunately I couldn't record it because I didn't think about it till after the fact, and there's no way that I can fit me, the edger, and the GoPro inside this closet and edge successfully and be able to show you guys what I'm talking about. So anyways, when you're edging into a corner, right, how many times have we seen it as professionals? There's a couple different things that we see, right? So there's all these sanding lines into the baseboard where the previous company sanded it and they dug into the base. Adjust your machine, adjust your paper, what have you. Why they kept going, I got no clue. But, so on the corner itself, when you're making the transition from here to here, if you happen to make that sort of a movement like that, that's fine. You're just gonna ease up on the machine and move it pretty quick, because what you don't want to have is you don't want to have a big gigantic ridge here that now you have to come along and try to handle with the scraper. That is not a good time. So this one's all done. I know it's a little bit wider than normal. A lot of people think, oh well, I'm just going to get in as close as I can here and start as close as I can here, and then you have a smaller space to scrape. Unfortunately, you're going to have a much higher ridge at the front of that nose of that edger digs in. So it is what it is. Feather in, leave yourself more to scrape. Trust me, it's a lot less crap to deal with. And remember how we spoke before that you could scrape and the boards aren't all the way against the base, or there's a gap between the board and the base, and the edger, the scraper can get stuck in there, and you just tilt it a little bit. You're still pulling it straight, but you're just tilting a little bit. I don't need to do it here, but I can if I want to, right? Just to show you guys. A little bit of an angle, and it's still getting right against everything for the most part. Okay, let's give you guys a look at the Hyper Orbit from Hyper Grinder. So we got the second one in the country, and that was back in February, and here we are now in June. So there has been a container, at least one container that's made it to the States with a container full of Hyper Orbits from Italy. And this is an amazing machine. It's going to handle the final sand. We can do intercoat abrasion with it, and we can also stain with it. So basically it's a replacement for a buffer. It's just more versatile. Old school, we would normally screen with the buffer. This is before the planetaries and all that. We would finish up with the big machine, finish up with the edger, hard plate, and then screen with the buffer and do our polyurethane. Then we would obviously use the buffer to do intercoat abrasion. And now this machine is just a whole different ball of wax. So, as I mentioned yesterday, the professionals strive for what they call a tabletop finish, and that's usually achieved with your planetary sanders. Again, if you want to go back to old school, you can certainly do so by using a hard plate and a buffer. More labor intensive, not quite as versatile, and takes a lot longer to do it that way. So the technology stepping up into the sanding and refinishing of wood flooring, which you would never think was possible. How does technology step into something that really seems so simple, sanding wood, right? But it does. The abrasives, the machines, the way the machines move the abrasives, the chemicals, you name it, there's a science behind everything. So let's take a look at how this thing moves. Not only does it move in a circular motion, but it also oblongs at the same exact time. So while I can't manually spin this and oblong it at the same time, I can show you each motion individually. So there's your spin, and there's your oblong, okay? And because of the way this moves the abrasive, you get an amazing finish. So you go from a tabletop finish, which is what the hyper grinder will leave you with, to literally a piano top finish. This machine is not for everybody. This machine is for those who want to take the quality of their sand job to the next step. In reality, for the professionals who use festuals and use their Rotex, we have a Rotex RO 125. We have a Rotex RO 150. So if you think about it, this is really a Rotex on the end of a stick. A thin white pad will do it. And that's enough to hold the abrasive on while it's on the floor. The weight of the machine and the abrasive will grab onto the white pad and you're off to the races. Okay, so you can buy this machine in at least two different configurations. One with an onboard vacuum and one with no onboard vacuum that you would just normally run your dust collection system right down to the base where this hose is going to. We opted for the onboard vacuum. It's just one less thing that we have to contend with when we're sanding. We already have to deal with the cord. I don't want to deal with the hose at the same time. There is another model out that it's the same model, and they put a knuckle in the handle, so it's actually a foldable handle, much like the variable speed hyper grinder. All right, so these 3 bedrooms are done completely, ready for finish. Hyper Orbit does an amazing job. I'm going to bring you up into the living room and give you a look a little bit better, hopefully, where the sun is coming in the front window. You can see a little bit better on how the floor reacts to the hyper grinder and the hyper orbit. And so when we talk about flatness in the video that I made yesterday, you've got your soft grain and you've got your hard grain, especially on an open grain floor. red oak, white oak, ash, you should be able to not feel a difference between this dark and the in-between light, dark and light, dark and light, right? And you used to be able to feel variations in height. And that's just a thing of the past now with the advent of the planetary sanders. And then what the hyper orbit does is it just removes the scratch. We always refer to it as chasing scratch. You're changing the scratch, and this machine leaves you with no scratch. Unbelievable. And the nice thing about this, in so many ways, is that when it comes down to laying finish or stain, when you're sanding the floor with the hyper orbit, you're sanding it to the degree that you're closing up the grain a little bit more than you would normally be able to do so, but you're not polishing or burnishing the flooring, okay? And that's very important. So when you go to apply your stain or your finish, you're gonna get a little bit more mileage out of your stain and or your finishes because you've closed the grain up that much more. We're gonna run bonus Tampico brush on the bottom of the buffer. Then we're gonna vacuum it up and we're gonna polyurethane. We are gonna do a dry tack. So normally we would tack out the flooring, get a rag, a dish towel, old dish towel, something along those lines. Submerge it in water, wring it out as dry as we possibly can, and then go up and down the flooring and pick up any dust that the vacuum may not get. In this case, we're on white oak, and what can happen is if you do that with water on white oak, you could potentially run the risk of tannin pull. And that's a term that probably only the professionals are gonna know, but we are not looking to get tannin pull, so we are not going to do the traditional tack method. We are actually gonna do a dry tack. And this client wants oil-based finish. He wants that golden hue to it. So we're gonna use Game Time's system, and we're gonna do oil-based finish, and the ultimate top coat is gonna end up being a matte sheen. But we are ready to go, and those machines do an amazing job. The abrasives that we use, they're fantastic. And the urethane systems that the professionals use are bar none for the most part. Most of them are just incredible. The durability, the longevity, everything about having your floors professionally done is or should be top notch. All right, so we're ready to lay down the first coat. Couple things: no fans on, no windows open, no extra airflow, and we turn the heat on. Even though it's summertime here in New England, we're still dealing with warm days but colder nights. So if we can keep it at a consistent or not let it go up below like 70 or 72, that's ideal for the urethane to really set up where we are. And a couple more points of interest. We don't fill floors. We're in New England, and there's kind of a rule of thumb that east of the Mississippi, you don't fill a floor. And why is that? Because the flooring expands and contracts, and it just, the filler just cracks and comes out over the years. And not that we haven't offered it before to clients, it's an upcharge to trowel fill a whole entire floor and then go through it and sand it. and then get it prepped for urethane. But you can actually tell where previous companies had filled the flooring right there, and a majority of it's all out. So that's why in New England, we don't fill any floors. I mean, clients don't even ask us about it. And, you know, we all realize that wood expansion and contraction literally happens everywhere. So, you know, we've got joint openings literally anywhere 2 pieces of wood meet. So this is where we're at in New England. They actually filled that one a little bit, or they tried to. You know what I mean? So it's just part of the nature of wood, and it's part of the nature of the geographical location, depending on where you are. So it's not going to be a beneficial situation. And the gaps, you know, even in white oak 2 1/4 can get quite excessive, believe it or not. And here we are in June, when your seasonal gaps, if you will, really should be just about all gone. And obviously they're not. So that's the reason why we don't tend to even suggest anybody fill any floors. So we're off to the races here, and I know that a lot of people tend to urethane a different way. There's a T-bar method. We've done that. Rolling a lot of the urethanes now, whether they're oil or water-based, they are designed to actually roll. In most cases, we choose to roll, and the reason being is because when you T-bar, you pour a line right down the floor, so you're pouring the product directly onto the floor. And the reason why we choose not to do that, it goes right back to the gaps again. We're going to lose more product in between the gaps than we're going to have on top of the flooring. So, and this floor we could actually T-bar and get away with it and be okay. A majority of the floors that we do, especially the pine ones, whether they're tongue groove or pine plank or what have you, there are just gaps in there that are like riverbed gaps. So we're not about to lose a majority of our product just to satisfy one certain way of laying polyurethane down. So, okay, so what we do is we work 2 people, obviously. Just for this video right here, I'm gonna probably just run me and just show you how it's done really quick in a small area. So we run the straight walls first, and then we come up. And I know a lot of people, what they do when they come in towards the base, they'll dip their brush or paint pad or whatever they're using for an applicator, and they'll run it right along the base, and we don't do that. So what we do is we either use a 4 or a 6-inch, they call it a stain brush, like for staining decks. Holds a lot of product, it's thick. We're gonna dip it, and when I do the cross grain, I'm gonna actually wipe out about 2 brush lengths from the base and then work my way in, and that gives me a nice swath and a nice, you know, space that's already coated this way, right? So I'm gonna go like this, and then I'm gonna work my way in towards the base, just like that. And then when it comes down to the roller, I'm gonna feather the roller right into that. And so what that's gonna do, there are a lot of professionals out there that have a little bit of an issue where they get what they call a halo. So in other words, the end grain walls end up being a little bit of a different color than the field, and usually that's caused from a mill rate difference. So the mill thickness of the urethane on the edges isn't always the same, or at least close to the same as what the field is, and that's what will kind of give you that halo effect. So the way we alleviate that is, like I said, we'll dip the brush and we'll start out about 2 brush widths out, and we'll brush in towards the wall, and then the other person will literally come right behind whoever's doing the edge work with the brush, and they'll meet up and feather it in with the roller. I'm actually gonna do the whole width of the closet, right down the whole entire length of the room, which is usually a little bit wider than what we normally do, but I should be able to do it pretty fast for you. So I'm gonna brush in like this. Done. And I'm done, and then I can nail it with the roller. Okay, so this first coat is done. I gotta tell you, I'm really not a fan. I like the water base on the white oak better. But like I said, a lot of people don't want to do the water that are in the field because they're afraid of tandem pull. And I get that. And we would have done water, no problem. The client wanted the older, more classic look to these floors, which is pretty much what they were. And they're gonna lighten up a little bit when the product dries and we abrade it. But you also notice that we cross roll, right? So I cross roll first, and that forces the urethane into the pores of the wood at a different angle, and then I come along and obviously run the roller straight to redirect the urethane the right way. So that's a wrap for today, I guess. Tomorrow we'll come in and we'll intercoat and braid it with the hyper orbit. And then we'll do one more coat tomorrow. And then the same thing follows true on the day after that. So there you go, you guys. Any questions, pop a comment down below and I will certainly try to answer them.